Warriors. We're going to wrap up our ministry development class recap today because today was the last day of class. And a couple powerful things today. Got to hear the story of a 24-year-old Romanian immigrant. Came to America when she was 4 with her family, and how Christ has divinely worked in her entire life to get her to the point where she is today. And then another young man, Nick from Iowa. Again, another powerful story, seeing how God has forged his life to this very moment in time. Got to share my story, and it was good to be with this next generation. And that brings me into ministry models, because we also learned a little bit about ministry models today, and it was once again paradigm shifting. I think everything Rob and I have talked about through the various churches that we've been to and ministry models we've seen, some good, some bad, some ugly, obviously filled with people that are trying to do great work for Christ. Yet Jesus does believe in planning, and I think we can look to the New Testament and Jesus to understand how the ministry model has shifted, how we used to be in a Christendom age, where Christ and the church had a mutual benefiting relationship with society. But throughout time, we're in a more and more post-Christendom age where the church is seen, I don't know how you word it, but either irrelevant or viewed with suspicion. Definitely throughout Europe now, throughout the northern states, and I think there's pockets, obviously, of Christendom still existing in certain small towns in the north, and you see those huge church plants, mega church growth in the south. But you can definitely get the feel of society that we are in a post-Christendom era, and that means major shifts for churches. So if you think of the best way our professor, Dr. Sell, explained this was with 2 triangles on the board. So on your piece of paper in front of you, or on your whiteboard, or in your mind, draw a triangle on your left. Let's say you're looking ahead. Draw a triangle on your left and a triangle on your right. So you know how a triangle goes. All right. And basically what we're talking about here are late American Christendom and a more missional ministry. And basically the way it used to be in Christendom, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, I'm sorry. It used to be a come see us type of ministry, And now we need to go into a more New Testament Jesus ministry of go and seek them out ministry, where we need to penetrate the relationships, penetrate the relational web of pre-believers where they are, because they are not going to come and see us anymore. Most of the church growth you see these days is simply from new churches popping up and attracting members from other churches in order to drive their growth. Okay, and then the other thing we need to do is we need to shift away from a program-based ministry, shifting away from Sunday school, cognitive learning, preaching. Now, those things have their place, so relax, but we need to shift into more relationships. And again, I'm biased on this because God seemed to design me as an extrovert and with this love or sense towards people, but this is from Dr. Sell, who's an INTJ, which is pretty much opposite than I am, and mine is an ENFJ, that's mine. But Dr. Sell was saying how we need to get away from this program type of ministry model, which essentially a church would be better off hiring an MBA to run their programs versus an MDiv student, and shift into relationships. And I feel this. My personal story is I just feel like people are not very good at relationship right now within the church. They are so busy running their programs, and that was one of Dr. Sell's points, that we're so busy running programs in the church, we don't have time for relationships outside the church. And I would submit to you that the relationships inside the church aren't that great either. I mean, I think it's fine as long as you're within a certain ministry or you're well known in church. But for the most part, I've felt like an outsider at church for quite some time now, because I just do not feel people do relationships very well within the church, and part of it is we have programmed ourselves to death inside the church. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is shift away from a marketing type of ministry model where we have all these programs, we want people to come see us, so we're always marketing or doing ineffective ways to attract people to us instead of developing disciples. In a go and seek ministry model, we want to go and make disciples. And making disciples, or how you define a disciple, Dr. Sell, we need to sit down and we need to come up with 10 to 12 sentences basically on how we would define someone as a growing disciple. And then we need another 10 or 12 sentences to define what we would be doing to develop disciples, and that flows into our strategy. So I know that's real confusing, and I'll probably have to whiteboard this thing and refilm it at some point, but the key there is we are making disciples. So I was talking to Bob, and he's a pastor and actually has been implementing this model, and I'll read a book on this too. I forget what it's called, but it's by Coleman, I think, Robert Coleman. Master Evangelism, I think the book is called. And Bob was telling me that the way he sees it is you have one person discipling 3. And so each of those 3 people should be discipling another 3. But your role as I'm not going to call it mentor because that seems so weird, the guy who's doing the discipling, the guy carrying out what Jesus did with his disciples, well, you need to know also the 3 people that are being discipled under the 3 people that you're being discipled under. Because not obviously, but the flaw in the go and seek disciple building ministry model is that unless you develop leaders who are strong, and typically what I found in the marketplace, and we'll see how it translates in the ministry, is I could basically develop leaders that were beneath me, or worked with me, leaders. I think we're all together on this, so beneath is a bad term, more of a flat organizational structure. But what I'm saying is, if I was at 100% leadership ability, which I'm not, but let's just say, back in the old days of developing leaders, my leaders would be at 5% of my capacity. And I think over time, it's very subjective, but I think I got leaders to function 50, 60, 70, 80% of my ability of leadership. So you always lose something when you're discipling, because obviously you're usually discipling someone at your level or below, and you're training them up in the way they should go in leadership. So they're always going to be beneath you, quote unquote. They're always going to be trying to catch up with you. They always have some skills to learn to get to your leadership level, because as you're discipling, hopefully someone is discipling you as well too. And if you're that good of a leader that you can't find anybody else to disciple you, then let Jesus disciple you, and he will strip away any pretense that you actually know what you're doing. You know what I'm saying? All right, so that would be the thing, is you go out and make disciples. So we again I'm not really sure, I'm trying to wrap my brain around this, but essentially, if we only have so many hours in a day, I'm thinking we have a church that has a Sunday service. You probably have some children's and youth programs, and you stop doing programs, or you do way, way, way less of them. The sticky church model of ministry has Sunday morning, and to me, I read it as you have small groups. So in the go and seek ministry model, the problem with that is we're all hanging out, and I think we can all recognize this about ourselves in ministry or in church settings, is after a few years, we only hang out with people that are believers, and we lose the ability to relate to pre-believers, and we lose the opportunities to disciple pre-believers. And I guess that's what I'm going to say there too, is ask the question, can you disciple pre-believers? And I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that you're going to have to pour into people's lives who are pre-believers, and we'll figure this out ourselves. We're going to roll up our sleeves, and we're going to see how we can get them from wherever they are in their belief of Christ to being a disciple of Christ. So we're going to spend less time doing programs and more time working on our relational skills. And this is going to be headed by the pastor, where the pastor is turning into a program director, or maybe there's pastors out there who are really into preaching, so they do preaching, but they have a staff that runs the programs. And my ever-evolving ministry model is going to revolve around me as the pastor, either as a senior pastor or working under another pastor, as my job is to equip the saints to do the ministry, not to equip the saints to come to a program. And we're going to, I guess let's break this down. Let's say we had 25 people coming to church. I was preaching on Sundays. All of the sermons, not all of them, but a lot of the preaching is going to revolve around equipping the saints to do the ministry and equipping the saints to do a New Testament Jesus style of kingdom advancing, and that's go and seek, penetrate the relationship webs that are out in society, not have more programs. And again, that should be very interesting. We'll see how this will apply with Awanas and Bible studies, and Financial Peace University is just an ultimate paradigm shift for this young minister. All right, so America and the world is increasingly resistant to going to church. We can no longer afford to be a come and see us ministry model. We need to shift our focus more to a New Testament Jesus type of ministry model now that we're in the post-Christendom era. I think it was fine when we were in the Christendom era, and people would come to church and they would come see the church. That was fine, but now we've shifted back to just like it was in Paul's time and Peter's time after Jesus was ascended, that there was not buildings of churches, there was not programming. It's the disciples went out and they went and seeked out people for the kingdom, much like Jesus did in Luke 19:10, where Jesus not only came to save us, he came to seek us out so that we could experience his love of us. Most importantly, understand that we were made to love him, to worship him, to exalt and bask in his awesomeness. And that's going to take a new type of ministry model, which is to go and seek them model of ministry. All right. You guys have a great day.